Allow me to introduce you to ADAMA.
Atlanta is the Black Mecca. We know this already. We are home to people of African descent and the epicenter of arts and culture.
But where can you go to experience Black art and culture, illuminating the depth and breadth of the African diaspora?
Launched in March 2020 as a museum without walls, ADAMA quickly emerged as a space that is already engaged in communities around the world.
The best part about being a founding member of ADAMA
is knowing that I'm part of making history.
By contributing to ADAMA, you're joining a global community of dreamers and builders,
bringing forth a world-class museum
that highlights the Black global experience.
And it's all happening here.
Right here.
Right here.
Right here, right now.
Right here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Join us.
Give.
And get involved.
ADAMA.
All right. Welcome, everyone. We are having our very first in-person art salon for the 2023 spring season right here at Pittsburgh Yards. I'm very excited for you all to meet our lovely guests who have flown in from all over just to be a part of this event. We are going to kick it off with Chantel.
Hey everyone, I'm Chantel Thompson. And I'm back with you. I was here last week on our virtual conversation, which we started around creating an African-centered, Black-led art ecosystem. In that episode, I had two amazing artists who both live and work on the African continent. So we had Reggie, who's South African, who is currently building a residency space in Zanzibar, Tanzania. And there was Kaloki, born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya, who is launching his residency space in Nairobi next week. And I'm flying out to see that. So it's really, really exciting. If you missed that episode, please make sure you go back and listen to that because it was really great. I went into that conversation kind of with this idea of what this African-centered art ecosystem could be, as if it was something that needed to be created. And then these two artists just explained what's happening in their environment. And to me, that was this African-centered art ecosystem that I was grappling in my mind around, like what it is, what does it look like? But today we're going to continue that conversation. We're doing it here on American soil with the diaspora to bring their voices into the conversation and see how they perceive this idea of an African-centered, Black-led art ecosystem, you know, what it means to them, what it looks like, whether they see it, if it's something that's happening, how does one, you know, sustain that, make it thrive, how does one enter into that, you know? So that's where we're at today. I'm going to start by introducing you to our first panelist. We have Calvin LaMont.
Hello. I'm Calvin LaMont. I'm an art collector, a new art collector, been collecting for about a little over a year now. I'm a real estate developer, and I'm also a co-host on HGTV's show, Buy to Build It.
Yeah,
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Chantel.
That's okay. And then Ferguson, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Ferguson, I'm an artist too, and I work in the auction house with fillers.
Okay, so I think I want to start with you, Calvin. Okay, because you said you're quite new into the space as a collector, and you know when we think about the art ecosystem, collectors are really, really important. And you know, at the moment, we're having so much art generated on the African continent that is in the international market. You know, I think it's important that we do have, you know, Africans in the diaspora, or those of African heritage, however you want to position yourself, your own identity, collecting the work. So I want you to start by letting us know, why is it that you started collecting, and how you found that journey so far?
I think I've always been a collector in heart when it comes to just being able to identify things that I think that are original, that have value, and that I want to hold and be a teller of the story. As a builder, as a designer, I understand things that are unique, but also things that could be copied and done over and over and over again. So the art world is an industry where you can still find, in a time where it's very difficult, the uniqueness and the originality of something that's unique to and then but also represent something that's more than yourself. So I started collecting art seriously. When I say seriously, some been talking to my mentors and actually with Chantel and other people, and actually doing the research and actually putting a lot of time in it and being thoughtful with every piece that I buy. I started that about a year ago, and I think I did that because of the foundation that my brother and I had started. I'm a twin brother. My twin brother's not here right now, unfortunately. Shout out to my brother Chris LaMont. But my brother and I's foundation, the LaMont Family Foundation, our goal is to cultivate communities and children through art across the nations and globe. We've actually started that. We should be having our first gala sometime in 2023. So not only am I collecting and learning for myself and my family, but also as I immerse myself more into this art industry with my foundation and have all these amazing men and women around me who are more experts and can kind of guide me, like a Ferguson who works for Phillips. That's who I lean on, men and women like you, Ferguson and Chantel. So that was why I really wanted to do the art, because of the responsibility that art has in culture. It's so important. Like a house that stayed for 100 years, the art, when I look back at communities and culture, art sometimes is the only piece left in a culture that you could even bring anything of realness out of. So that's one of the main reasons why I pivoted back towards collecting art.
Okay. And I just want to expand on that a bit more. I know your collection is quite diverse and varied, and you collect from a wide range of artists, but I know you also really focus on collecting from artists who are based on the African continent. So can you tell us some of the artists that you've collected from on the African continent, and then also why that's really important to you?
Well, I think it's almost like a renaissance coming from Africa, the continent of Africa, and other Black communities, even in America, not as prevalent, as my opinion, as some of the African countries are, but because I believe that's more of an educational issue, because in Africa, I think the artists may go through a little more of a process, the education in the school and the more formal training than Americans. We might do it a little more. This is my rough opinion of, we might have been a little more self-taught. So the process might be a little different from African American, Africans and Africans who are Americans, right? But to answer your question, Chantel, about strictly about that, the artists that I'm collecting right now, yes, I am collecting more artists from the African regions because their art connects with me more. When I first became a collector a little over a year ago, all I saw was art that seemed like it was from Africa. It wasn't. Everything had like it was wiped in African culture, African, and it's everything that kind of resonated with that continent was in America, but it wasn't from Africa. So I said, you know what, this isn't what I want. I don't want things that are mass produced. I want things that are original. I want it from the original. I want from the original thought of a human, of a person out there. So when I started looking at art and finding out where it really came from, where those ideals in those paintings really came from, and all the different type of artists like Koloki, like he was on your show last week, that I collected, and Reggie, who like you said, I missed the opportunity with Reggie. I was a younger artist, and of course, when you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on art, it's still a lot of money in my eyes. So I have to be careful buying every piece, but hopefully he'll forgive me and come back. I also own artists from Nan, Tanya Najad, Otis, Q.
Don't forget Ajay.
Hey, that's gonna be my last but not least.
Sorry.
And Ajay, so like he is. Thank you so much for connecting me with him, and also a lot of my mentors in the industry. They're focused right now on more work that comes from that region of the world presently, and then also the value is being seen a lot more, in my opinion, than other Black countries where art coming from. It could be from Jamaica, it could be from the Caribbean, it could be from America, but I think the most respect right now is from the continent of Africa when it comes to the value and the acceptance in certain venues.
Okay, so I'm gonna take from that and pose my next question, because that's important what you're saying. There is so much value right now on art that's coming from the African continent. But you know, if we're thinking about having this like African-centered or Black-led art ecosystem, you know, is there a place for art from the Caribbean, in your opinion?
Yeah, at Ferguson, that one he might know better than me.
No, I'm asking you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be to Ferguson in a minute. What do you think?
My bad, boss. You know, she's my boss. Hey, she gonna tell me. She my director. She gonna tell me to do. I think the are you done with your question? The full question?
Yeah. So I mean, do you think there's place for art from the Caribbean as well in this, you know, African-centered? Does it have a place in the narrative?
I think it does, and it should. And if it doesn't, we're doing a detriment to the industry itself as a Black person, because again, we're trying to segregate ourselves by any means necessary. First, it was the tone of your skin. It's how you talk. Then it's the economical and sociological barriers you have, and then now it's where you live in your region, right? Now that's not in the order. That's not in no order. Those are all prevalent, but not mutually exclusive. So what I'm saying is, if we continue to let other people segment us because of they're identifying this as value and this not, that's where we're going to fall by the wayside and we'll never get out. In my opinion, we're going to have to look at the art, not as we look at music industry or rappers and saying, oh, if that artist doesn't have, this is what I'm saying as a new collector, if the artist doesn't fit a mold of X, Y, and Z, just like a rapper or a singer would be, and this only in the black art community, they're not going to succeed as fast as somebody else, another maybe background or race, because for some reason we need to have everything fit in place for an artist to be successful. It just can't be based off the work that they do, in my opinion.
No, I hear you, and I agree with what you're saying, because as I said, I feel like if we are going to get to a point where we do have this, you know, African-centered Black-led, then everyone needs to be involved. And a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment, I'm building on for this year, is creating more links between Africa and the Caribbean. So I've spent quite a bit of time already this year in the Caribbean, different islands, meeting with artists and curators. And last year, I established lots of relationships, you know, and a new business partner in terms of what I'm doing with my art is from the Bahamas, is Bahamian. So we're very much thinking about how to bridge that gap between the African continent and the Caribbean, and then bring in the diaspora as a wider narrative. I'm not going to give too much away because that's stuff I'm going to reveal later on. But actually, Ferguson, I want to just kind of come over to you, because you do work in Phillips Auction House. So you are aware of the current trends. What are you seeing in Phillips, in the auction house, in terms of trends when it comes to Black, African, Caribbean art? What are you seeing?
Yeah, for me, it's demand for a lot of Black art. You know, a lot of our young artists now, back in the day, it used to be you have to go through a long, you know, journey before you get to the auction house. But now it's easy access to like get your work in the auction house, you know. But the long journey still applies to sustain your market. So the demand is there.
Demand for what?
Demand for Black art.
And when you say Black art, like what specifically within that? It's a big umbrella,
it's a
you know?
Big umbrella, right? You know, you have artists that have set works have been in museums, but have not been into auction yet, right? And then you have artists that are very popular on social media and doing gallery shows, and now their work is coming to the auction house, because there is a thing about, like, you know, the auction house is where the public can gauge how an artist is doing for his market, right? So you have demands coming in that, hey, this artist is, let's say, popular or popping, you know, there's a hype beast around the artist. So now I want this in my collection. And what it does is certifies the artist, and then it certifies your collection. So there is that demand that, a lot of collectors want Black art. For example, Ghanaian artists. There's a booming art scene, and you are, front and center of how the art is in Ghana. So a lot of collectors are watching what's going on, and they're like, okay, we want so and so artists in our collection, because it kind of solidified their collection in a way, because that is what is hot.
Okay, now let's think about that, because in all of that conversation, we've talked a lot about the Black artists and African artists, whatever else. And it's very clear in terms of the ecosystem that there are a lot of them. But the other parts of the ecosystem, for example, the collectors, what are you seeing from the auction house in terms of Black or African or Caribbean collectors? Are there enough, do you think, from what you're seeing working at Lips Auction House?
There is a lot of Black collectors, but they don't have the, how do you say, infrastructure of certifying their collection, because they've been collecting through passion. Because, like you said, they've been collecting from a young artist. When they walk into the studio, they see the work, they like it, but they don't understand that there's a whole nother side where you certify your collection, so that when you go back to a gallery and you want to buy something, they say, oh, this is you collecting for so and so collection. Okay, we are going to sell you, and that is the part for me, is my goal, to like bring them in and explain to them, like, this is how you can protect your work, ensure it in a way that that, hey, you have an AJ works.
They might go through more of that process of going through schools than maybe the Americans, Black. Where we could bring collectors in to understand the process of taking advantage of the value of your work, and then exponentially growing the value of your work along with the artist. So that it's okay for my communities that I buy homes in, that I sell for 200 to sell for 400, as long as the people that I originally put in there are benefiting. So it's okay for me to sell the paint for 300K when I bought it for 50,000, as long as the artist is with me and the community is with me benefiting. So I take the same type of strategy when I come to building homes and communities. Newer industry, because believe it or not, the Black community is still new in ownership in homes too, if you look at the numbers. So it's very similar in the art industry and the home industry of trying to teach them how to be a homeowner and teach them how to be a collector and how to take advantage of those things through taxes and business and how you and you help your community, you help the art community. So that's how I kind of relate to it.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of expand on that conversation because I think it's very, very important. You know, last week we were focusing very much on artists, and there was a big conversation around curators in terms of the ecosystem. But, you know, one of the reasons I brought you on is because you are a new collector and you're on this journey. Before we do that, I just want to touch on the point that you've raised a few times around this idea of like African Americans being more self-taught as opposed to Africans on the continent going through training. I don't necessarily feel like that is particularly a fact. There are a lot of self-taught artists on the African continent because there is less of an infrastructure when it comes to art. And this is my experience having, you know, lived there and spend time with artists who are based there. And what's happening now, what's part of the boom that sometimes people don't see, because a lot of people are seeing like numbers in the auction houses, they're seeing like celebrity kind of, you know, Ghanaian artists, but what they're not seeing is the infrastructure that they're building. So I'm going to talk just about Ghana because that's where I'm based at the moment. You know, one of the key schools, Ghanata College of Art and Design, it got closed down. That was government funded. So at the moment, you know, the biggest school we have in terms of art training is the Kwame Nkrumah University of Technology and Science. And that has a very big art community there. Whose practice is really quite different to those that came from Ghanata. Ghanata is very much like skill-based, skill-based. You know, you keep working on something until you get it right, and that's why you get a very strong portraiture, figurative portraiture kind of practice out of them. And then when you go to somewhere like we just call it tech as a short name, so the Kwame Nkrumah University in Kumasi, you get more conceptual work. That's where you in like the top cloth kind of work, installation. There's a lot of talk around disturbing space. That's one of the big philosophies in terms of that school of thought. So you've got, you know, some of my favorite artists from that space, young guys like Hassan Issa, and Jonathan, who just recently had an exhibition at Gallery 1957. But at the moment, that's a university, right? And the college, you didn't have to have certain grades to be able to access that. So when you've got just universities, it makes it more difficult to access art education. But you know, there are artists who are building infrastructure. So Amwako Boafo has built his space. I'm going to give you a little bit of and reveal, because he hasn't really told many people, but Cornelius Anor, his space is going to open up this year. Kwesi Trey, Ibrahim Mahal has a space. There's so many, you know, and before they had physical spaces, all of these guys were mentoring others. So each artist has at least 5 mentees, and they'll generally go into their homes and you know, help them develop their practice. So that is actually what I know is my experience of living in Ghana and working alongside the artists there. That's how a lot of their training is. It's
entrepreneurship. I mean, of course. Do you think that the self-mentoring? So when I say education, I think I'm glad you cleared that up. I was more talking about it's respected more in the continent of Africa. So when you go through it, because it's hard to get through, because it's a little more, you could go through the process a little better and kind of get through the end. In my opinion, you can get almost put to the side in the States. There's not really schools for Blacks that they know to go to. There's not too many that are like, okay, you go to school, you're through.
I think,
but maybe
to touch on that, like I was born in Ghana and I came in 05, and I've always known how to draw, right? Self-taught, you know. And for me, I didn't go to art school until I went and did my master's for MFA for my practice. I went to undergrad for accounting, so you know, I've always learned how to draw, looking at images. You know, that is something that I love doing. But when I went to do my MFA, it was more to understand the conceptual framework of my art and what I'm doing. You know, and in Ghana, it's similar. It's the same situation where they all self-taught. You know, learning how to make the works, But also when they get into those spaces of the galleries and talking about the work, they talk about experience and culture. Now they formulating the conceptual part about their practices. So here in the United States, you go to school like and learn how to draw. I didn't take art class in school, you know, but in Ghana, like you said, Ghana, you learn how to do it, but then there's another school that is more conceptual. You learning how to, you know, put your thoughts and like, you know, the concept of your work together. But most of the time, most of the artists, because now we've seen a handful of artists that are booming. So we think, in a way, it's a practice that it's a school that is teaching them how to, you know, do all their skills. It's all self-taught. It's all practice.
Yeah.
And when I say self-taught, I mean when I say school, I don't mean the school of drawing. Like I can never draw. I'm talking about the school of what you said, the infrastructure of how. So I like building houses. I need to know how to navigate through the industry of art as an artist per se. Not, and then of course toning your skills in art. So do you think that schools need to do more of that? Is it somebody else's? Because of course, going to school to draw is just one thing, but I was more talking about the school because of the business side of art.
We don't have that in Ghana.
Yeah,
we don't have that. They are literally stumbling and learning, you know. That's some work that I do is spending time with those artists and helping kind of bridge that gap, because, you know, a lot of them have been selling through Instagram, and that's their school is Instagram at the moment. Yeah. And that's not a real school. And there's very few people who actually gain access to the university because you've got to pay for it. And also with so many, and that university is in Kumasi. So if you are based in Accra, you know, you're going to have a 5-hour travel, and then you're going to have to live there and pay for lodging there. It's not easy. You have to have the means to be able to access it. And the majority of people don't have those means. You know, there's a number of art schools across the US, and, you know, in terms of access, that's a different conversation, but we don't have that there. And there are many countries where there's, you know, 1 or 2 institutions where they can formally go to learn art, you know, history and theory and everything else. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. This is not to say that there isn't infrastructure there is, but it isn't as advanced and there's not as much access. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up. But, you know, as I say, we talked about it in last week's conversation. That is something that's building and developing. But you touched on, actually, I think we should probably dive into what about more of the business side. Do we need to do more? And yes, I believe we do, and that's definitely part of the ecosystem, because the ecosystem that we're thinking about being able to kind of sustain, because I feel like we've already started to create it. We're not at the beginnings of it. In order to sustain it, that's one of the things that we have to kind of work on and develop. So you guys were kind of touching on that in terms of being collectors and the business side of that. So yeah, I want to dive into that in terms of, so you having, you know, being an artist yourself, born and raised in Ghana, then moving to the US, in the US, being able to develop your practice, and then working in Philips, so seeing art from a more business side. What is it that you feel is most vital in terms of artists, collectors, curators, whoever it is within the ecosystem, being able to build their understanding of the business of art?
Yeah, one thing Philips has taught me is agreements, contracts. You know, from an artist's point, before work is your studio to go out there, you know, once there have to be some sort of agreement, right, that you have with your gallery. But if you're selling it directly to a collector, there's your trust is an agreement. But with a corporation like Philips, before any work comes through, it's all on paper, contract, this and that. How long are we consigning the work for? You know, what are we doing with the work? After it sells, okay, the buyer, what's the agreement that we have with you? Or you accepting to buy this? You paying the premium on top of the hammer? You know, when are you picking up the work? Now it leaves us, okay, on to the next one. As an artist, most of the time we leave everything to the gallery to handle that. We never look at a contract. you know. So if a big name gallery comes up and say, hey, we would like to show you, all you look at is, okay, exposure. Sometimes it might be good for you, but for me as an artist, the reason why I love working at Philips is because I get to see different type of contract and understand that, okay, if I'm able to, you know, put my work in the show, how long is it going to be? Is the gallery just going to take 5 works and not sell it, act like, you know, it's not selling, and wait till, you know, I'm doing well, and then try to resell it again? So you have to understand, you have to read the fine line. One thing, you know, our lawyers does with, you know, collectors lawyers is they go back and forth between agreeing, redlining contracts, and like looking at what is good for the corporation and what is good for the consignor. So for an artist, I always say you have to have 3 things. You know, as an artist, as an accountant, a lawyer, and a PR. You know, because a lawyer is going to look at the fine, you know, the language of the contract and tell you, okay, we could go around, the gallery could go around and say this. So you put in the right language. So looking at contracts, at least as an artist, let your lawyer sit you down once a week, explain everything to you like you're 2 years old, you know, so that you understand. So for me, it's understanding the contract, the negotiating that goes on between, like, you know, the paperwork, because you could trust people's words, but trusting the signature is better.
Yeah. I'm going to echo that because, you know, I've just had a recent situation. And in terms of what I do when I'm working with artists is, you know, being able to support when it comes to those legal issues. But a lot of the time when artists come and speak to me, it's always the first question I ask them was, what was said in the agreement? What was the contract? And most of the time they don't have one. And very recently, you know, I've had to get a lawyer involved to work on a contract and agreement that was given to an artist. And it said, as you were saying, the artist is hearing the name of the gallery, not even the name or like the city in which the gallery is based in, and they're just going based on that. You know, it's going to give me exposure. They've been given, you know, a 10-page agreement that they cannot comprehend. The language is difficult. So yeah, you know, and that's it. That's an artist who's had an agreement. There's most artists I know don't sign agreements. But let's go back to the agreement in terms of you know, obviously bought works through me, and I have an agreement that I sell the works with. How did you feel about that process of having to, you know, sign up to an agreement of a non-resell with certain kind of parameters in place?
I think it's a positive. I think it sets the tone. If you're a new collector who maybe doesn't have the same, I get that I might have more resources or access to other people. So if I didn't have those access and resources and I had a contract that come in and I didn't understand the artwork like I did, and I just wanted to buy a piece because it was pretty or because it was passion, that would kind of almost put me into a different frame of mind. Say, okay, wait, I'm buying. I love the painting. I just want it because it's my house. And I'm talking as not myself as a general collector who is. When I see the contract, I would say, wait, this is saying things that are, you know what I mean? That as I would look at as business, and I would take it as, okay, this is more serious than just buying a regular painting. So if you don't have a contract and you're dealing with somebody who maybe is not as, or is as savvy in our industry, they won't maybe do the things that Ferguson was talking about with your art, which is getting it appraised, getting it insured, and then getting it in the right areas where it's protected. But when you have a contract like when Chantel sends over, and then most of the people that I do business with, I do a lot of times directly with the artist, but I have bought several paintings from galleries as well. And when the contract comes in, it's usually similar to what you had, Chantel, which just has just to kind of go through it, not specifically in detail, but just if you want to sell the painting at certain intervals of times, what is expected? Just to bring it down in general terms, as easy as possible.
Yes.
What's the expectations if you doing that within a certain amount of time?
Yeah.
Right? Is that pretty much what the contract does? So when somebody reads that, even if you have no idea about art at all, if somebody read and said, you would think that, okay, this might be, this has some value in it. And most people would take the steps, you know what I mean, to be able to protect their investments.
Yeah.
Soon they think it's an investment, because before it's a painting, and then when you get the contract, it turns into an investment.
Yeah.
That's why I think the contract is a positive.
Yeah. And to add on that is what it does is it just disciplines how things move around, because you know, resale works part of the market, right? It's part of the ecosystem, you know.
Does it have to be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because the auction world is or the resale market is where the public get to see the, you know, the price of the artist's work, how it's selling, because galleries keep it very private, you know, and then galleries look at the secondary market to set their prices. So it's part of it. And sometimes collectors want to change, you know, rotate their collection. So, you know, they might buy the work, been in their collection for 20 years and want to, like, you know, put it out or sell it, but it changes hands to another good collector, you know, that also have to be disciplined and have contract in place. So the whole contract is just setting some sort of discipline action so that, you know, the work don't,
Get flipped.
Get flipped while the oil is still wet, you know.
Okay.
So, and also, how do you sustain the artist, you know, market? Because, you know, if the artist his work keep reselling, it seems like there's no value in the work, you know. So let's say 5 years, the artist have done museum shows, now done multiple solo shows. Now there is more value with that, you know. So now you want to resell it, it's set another level of price range for the artist now. So in another 5 years, the artists have to stay active and keep doing that to set another level. Just have to be sustainable in the long run, you know.
So what I want to pose to both of you is, because we're talking about this, you know, an African-centered Black-led art ecosystem, but a lot of what I'm hearing is that it's very much the same ecosystem that's already there. So, because when you're talking about the auction house and that's how people see the value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know, in my mind, I'm kind of like, I don't watch those things. And I don't care about those things. I see a piece of artwork and I love it. And I get to know the artist. And then that piece resonates with me for the longest time, right? Because this idea of art being a business, I don't know if that's what we really want to subscribe to. But I'm gonna.
Collector, I got to take you on further.
Okay.
It's all fine. Go ahead, my bad, bro.
No. I mean, because that's for you. That's why this conversation is open, okay? Because as I was saying, like an African-centered Black-led art ecosystem, to me, in my mind, is something that's different from what's already there. It's not either us fitting into what's there or us replicating what is there. Because if you're just replicating what is there, all of the issues that are there are just going to continue, flipping and everything else. Because just because you're changing the race of the people doesn't mean that the problems are going to disappear. We're people at the end of the day. When I'm thinking about something being African-centered, right, I'm thinking about us thinking about the heart and the soul of Africa, of us as people, right? And in terms of this monetary value, selling a painting for 20 grand, right, automatically stops a certain amount of people from being able to access it.
So this is why I got
So-
that's perfect. I'm glad you said now. So everything you said now, you just washed away.
Yeah.
So now I gotta tell you why. So now I gotta say that's so it's contradicting.
Yeah.
Now so it's hard to make money, guys.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody out there, it's not easy to be a millionaire. If you got it's very difficult to get to $1 million. So when you get to $1 million and you get to above that, you already have done something that not a lot of people have done, right? When you buy a house, when I sell a house, I sell homes that are millions, but I also sell homes that are only 250, 300,000, guys. But the homes that I sold for $300,000, I built for 150, 200. The homes I sold for $1 million, I built for 800,000. Art is different, guys. You gotta be careful if you're an artist and you're going to somebody saying, okay, well, my art is worth 50,000, but now, of course, it takes 20 years to get to that point to 50,000. So it took me 20 years to get to the 50,000, but it cost me $10 to paint the art. the cost to do it doesn't change. I have to build a house. It takes me 20 years to build a house, but it still takes me $200,000 to buy all the materials to build it. I can't sell the house for less than 20K. No way, I can't do it because I literally have value in the house. That's money. Now, if I'm dealing with things that are monetarily, I mean that are more subjective, but the value is based off of market, not based off of cost, right? There's not a lot of things in this world that the value is so off of the actual cost of the deal. Not saying that you can't build a house in 1905 and sell it in 2020. You have to do a lot of updates. There's still cost. So as a collector, I say all that to say, as a collector, soon as a collector, who, in my opinion, to be a collector, you have to be able to have discretionary money to pay for things. The artist, if you're collecting fine art, the artist has put so much time in, they need to charge a certain amount of money to be able to live and be able to move in that system. So the artist has to understand first that what I'm asking for isn't a light ask. Yeah. What I'm asking for there isn't a true number, quote unquote, but cost associated with what I'm doing per se. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying the paint doesn't cost money. I'm not saying the frame doesn't cost money. I'm not saying the school doesn't cost money. The architect had to go to school, design had to go to school. Everybody has to do those things. But certain things cost money to do and certain things don't. So when you're in a new industry of people who are Black, who can't understand, like I could understand that it doesn't matter about the cost, I'm more about the value. But if you go talk to somebody who has 3 kids who's never done this, remember in our community, we've just been free in America since a little while ago, let alone been buying art. So when you tell somebody like that and says, okay, you have $50,000 on this piece of art that's 16 by 20 or 20 by 20 or whatever the size is, and the only value, and for you to get that value back is you have to do what Ferguson said, which is go through the system, make sure you understand all that stuff. That's a lot to do as an artist, as a collector. And so you have to be able to raise the money and collect it. And then you have to be savvy enough to understand how to hold it and keep the value of it and be respected as a collector. Or you're that rich that you can spend 20, 30, 40, 50K and not give a damn. I'm somebody that can spend that money, but I still give a damn. So if I'm telling you I'm gonna spend $20,000 and the money's not respected, that's a lot of money to about 90% of people in the world, right? So if you want to bring the Black people in the industry that is on that outside of it, based off of the average Black person of all the races, I'm not saying we don't have a lot of rich people, but I'm saying that the average Black person is at a certain level of purchasing power, buying and stuff like that. And they're entering an ecosystem that they're not really a part of. Mm-hmm. So now they have to do something, pay money and buy things, and then join an ecosystem that they're not really a part of and understand, because there is no ecosystem that we have. Mm. It's harder to sell painted. You know what hard is for me to sell an artist to somebody that I know? Good luck. Yeah. I'm gonna have to sell it to, I'm gonna have to put it into the ecosystem that's already been there, because it's gonna be hard to tell somebody who's not a collector that $75,000 is not a lot of money for something that's this paint that costs no more than $100 to paint or $200. That's the difficulty in the new collector who hasn't been a part of the industry and who doesn't understand how to keep their art and push it through the ecosystem, or doesn't trust that if they touch the art, they'll be respected. Because I get that too. You know what I mean?
Sorry, you mentioned the thing of like being a respected collector, respected, but
I'm saying we don't. I'm saying there is no respect for us.
Let me.
But I don't know, because I've been collecting for years, and it's just something I've been doing ever since going back and forth to Ghana, like just being in the artistic space. You know, I never worked in the industry until recently, and I have a really big collection. I never had to sign anything because, as I said, I always knew the artist.
You're on the ground though. You know those artists.
No. But this is before I was even, working in a space. It's a passion of mine to collect the artwork. I don't pay the prices that I'm seeing on the marketplace, but all of these artists are doing really, really well, and they're selling at these prices. I met them at a different stage in their in their life and in their career. And as I say, some of the things that you're talking about in terms of like what a collector has to be a respected collector, as a collector, the collector.
No, I would say respected. I was saying, if you buy something that if I buy a house and you don't put home insurance on it, the bank won't give it to you. I tell you, soon you get our level of collecting. I'm not talking about buying pieces. We start paying. Is what is a number out here, guys, that is a lot of money to you? 5K, 10K. Where's a number where when you spend it, you say I have to be 20K, 30K. What's the number? No. Somebody give me one number. Somebody give me one number that's a lot of money to them that they say, if I spend this amount of money, I need to have these securities and these insurances on it, no matter what, if I like it or no matter what it is. Is there a number or is there not a number for it? Is there a number at all?
I think it's a different question.
Yeah, but I want to jump in. I want to put the two together and try my best. So you were saying it's wrong, and what you were saying is not wrong, right? So there is the passion of like you love the art and you buying it, right? And then there is another part of it where it's value, right? So yes, you bought an artwork, you've been collecting because you love the artwork. You said something, the artists are doing well. What is the definition of doing well? Shown with galleries, shown with museums. For example, nonprofit, you have to go seek money to do all this. This costs. You have to pay all the workers that is here, right? So it's all part of money that is, unfortunately, our society, how we move and, gauges something. So for an artist, when you're doing well, and it means it's bringing a lot of eyes to your work, that means value of the work is going to another level where you have to pay for this to get this now. So it's not necessarily taking away that we don't love the collecting part or love collecting art or value what the artist is doing.
The numbers get so high, I have to sing business.
The artists now have for a gallery, to show it for gallery now, as an artist, you want your work to be in magazines, right? So
why?
You said why?
I always say why. I think because
how would you find out about?
No, it's not necessary. I don't think. I think some of the things. Let me finish, because what I was trying to allude to the fact is, when we're talking, so much of what we take as our parameters as to like success and value and all this stuff, it is just what is already there, which has always been the very Eurocentric capitalist system, right? And when I'm thinking about an African-centered or Black-led, Black-run art ecosystem, there's no point of us even thinking about that if we just want to replicate what's there. What I'm thinking about is something that is separate from that. And not in order to like segregate us, but something that just has a different kind of vibe, a different kind of source, is moving in a different kind of way. It's not just us moving towards the same thing. But what I feel would be really beneficial right now is just to hear what other people have to say, okay? Because you've done a lot of listening. I'm sure you've all got your own ideas. And I would like to hear from you guys. Like, what is this? What does it look like to you? Where could we go? Yes, your hand is like, yeah.
So many things to say about this commentary. Number one, this sounds like hip hop and the conversations I have with my people when we were kids in New York City, LL and everybody else. We had our own ecosystem. When we then wanted the Grammys to validate us, when we then get mad because the Oscars not validating us and calling ourselves collectors based upon what? We got an opportunity right here now, and y'all still trying to get, not saying y'all, but we're still trying to move into colonialism and being accepted by someone else. I just looked at Phillips, and God bless where you work, because I know what it's like to be oppressed and work to fight corporate America. But there ain't a Black person I saw, and as soon as you said it, I Googled it. Who's validating what's a collector?
Yeah.
Who's validating where we say, well, we want to rise to what?
Thank you.
I'm so thinking about how I grew up in New York City, and if we would have just kept ours our own in hip hop, our valuation would have been so much higher than worried about who. And then you said, well, to be collectors, we want to be in magazines. Let me tell you, Jeezy, let me tell you, Master P, there are many people that without a white person laying eyes on them was making millions. So I'm just super concerned about taking this moment in time where we once again have that, like we had in hip hop in the 70s and 80s, to make our own, to start putting valuations on what white people think, so we can now be at the Oscars.
Thank you. We give her a round of applause. Hold on. Let's give her a round of applause because I really hear everything you're saying. Thank you.
I think you're mistaken when we say validation.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the. Yeah, I'm not talking about it at all.
It's white validation.
I'm talking about value to opinion.
I think I'm saying, why can't it be Black magazine that validate Black artists? You know, so because when we say validation, right, you're looking at an already established thing that you think we are getting validation from. I'm saying we have to understand how they got to that establishment, and then we have to validate ourselves. So for a collector who's been collecting and putting, you know, putting his work into, like, you know, appraisal and, like, you know, getting certain insurance on the collection. So now,
who's appraising? Actually, I do want to know this question. Who is appraising?
So I'll answer this one.
Artwork at home. Who's
So I'll get you on this one. So first off, so I understand where you're coming from because you come. So the word validation might set you off because it could be.
So you're asking the question about praise.
I know. But let me. So appraisal can be done by any insurance company. So
we're running out of time, and Dr. Fahamu also has a question. So let's keep to the question. Who's appraising your work?
Is that
there are. I mean.
Question, all right?
I mean, I just looked at Phillips auction. There was not a Black person on your.
So there's companies.
About appraisal companies.
But who's appraising your work then?
No,
these are insurance companies, but also people like the Green Farm Family Foundation. So there's other foundations that I use.
Because we don't
advisors. That's one.
There are, but you know.
So I'm gonna go so real quick on this one. I want to go.
Let's get to Dr. Fahamu.
Oh, Dr. Fahamu, after you, Doctor.
I wanted to make a comment about this idea again of validation, or even the sort of benchmarks that we're using to determine like how value is appreciated, right? So, for example, with ADAMA, one of the things that we have always tried to trouble and position ourselves around is ADAMA is not trying to be the Black version of a white museum, right? We've thrown out all of the models of what museums have conventionally been, because that language in and of itself is oppressive to the Black experience, right? So we're trying to adopt African-centered philosophies and ideas around what museums can be. And I think what Chantel is asking when we talk about building a Black art ecosystem is troubling us to do the same thing, right? Like, why do we need to be in magazines? Why do we need to have gallery shows? Why do we need to be on auctions, right? For our art to have value, when it should already have value because it's telling our story, it's reflecting us. And so the value is intrinsic, right? You talked about cost versus value, right? And you were using as an analogy the example of the cost it takes to build a house versus what it sells, right? And you said it's difficult to put value on art because the costs aren't the same.
Not difficult. I was just saying that it's for. I was speaking in general terms. If you're a new collector, and I'm talking about Black people now, so I'm coming from realistically saying that we're Black who don't have the experience.
But there are people who've been collecting
for
the longest time.
I know, I'm saying that, but what I'm saying is based off of me. So I'm saying me. I know I can go to a lot of people and say, "Oh, I don't collect art. I don't really know about it." And I was one of those a year ago. I'm 37, so I'm just talking in reality of me being outside of the art world and saying, as the average person, the doctors, the lawyer, there's a whole bunch of those.
I get that, and I think again the point is we have to re-language that. Right?
Yeah.
There are people who have been collecting. I taught a class with some kids from Morehouse, and it was online, so I could see their spaces, right? And the first question that I asked them was, "What is your relationship to art?" 98% of them was like, "I don't have a relationship to art." I'm like, look at the clothes that you have on.
And that's that contract that when you send you sometimes, it makes you feel more like, for example, like when you're collecting art, you don't even know sometimes, even though you're collecting it, right?
But that's what I'm saying.
And then it's
kind of language, right? Like, you know, what we do, the way we do it, has value, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be put into the context or into the language of Eurocentric capitalism for it to have value.
Yeah.
But let me just say this one more thing. I have one more thing. But let me just say this, because what you even said about building a house, colonialism and white men can redline that stuff, and your value has decreased. So what I'm saying is, by putting anything and using that term, there is always a way for them to make it not work for us. And I just want this, I just feel like the purpose of all of this is for us to think differently.
Yeah. So real quick, I'm gonna say, go ahead.
So we have an online question for viewers. Is there a process or platform that any of you would recommend for artists to get their work seen by collectors?
So I'm gonna say one thing. So as a collector, I'm coming from a collector side who's not in the industry.
Is this answering the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there it? Okay. So they asked that.
A platform.
Is there a process
or a platform
for
artists for them to get their work seen?
Yeah. So as a collector, I'm the one trying to see the work. So when they say seen, they mean by people like me or seen by galleries and museums? Okay. So I look at the platforms that I look at through outside of my main platform is other collectors, and curators and galleries. That's one of my main platforms because that's what I'm looking for. But then I also, and in the general, just what I like, and this is why I have rules of buying paint, because I like so much art that, doctor, I'll buy art every single day. I'll be broke. So I have to kind of, because art is so amazing, I kind of put some rules in for myself. So I look at Artsy. So Artsy, of course, the auction houses a lot. And the reason why I look at the auction houses a lot is because of not only the value of it, it's because I discover new artists. And I like to see artists from all other regions and what they're doing compared to our African artists and why. And then I want to see why. I go back and look at, well, what did they do and why is their art here? And why I literally go back and say, where did this work come through? And where did this work come through? And why are they right here? Why is this one here? Why I say here at the value in this auction house, in this place? And why isn't this work here? This one looks better to me than this one. So I'm kind of going down to, like, I'm actually breaking myself down as humble as possible with saying, I don't know anything. And I want to know why this artist painting is worth $200,000 and this artist painting is worth $20,000 and this artist seems to be more or whatever. I mean, so that's where as a collector, you get not worried or scared, but you know, if you want to collect like me for the rest of your life and you're going to have millions of dollars of art, I don't want it to be canvas. I'm still a businessman. So even though I love the art at a certain number, no matter what, I have to look at it differently just because I don't want to feel like I've been taken advantage of as a person, even though I love it.
So the platforms you are saying are Artsy and
all the auction houses
and
other galleries. I also talk to as well.
So in terms of, if I was thinking about platforms where collectors can go to see good artwork or artwork that's out there, you know, there's Art Noir. I have a platform. I've been a little bit lazy with it, but Beyond the Black Canvas, and I like to always champion voices that aren't in these spaces like Artsy and auction houses, you know, just people I know throughout the community and just what I'm seeing online. Obviously, Instagram is great, and then certain galleries are great, you know, Art Melanated. I mean, you can look on ADAMA, and I feel there are a whole host of Black kind of run, Black-led platforms on Instagram. And those are really great places, I would say, to find art to collect. Is there any other questions, or should we?
I got a question for Doc. I got one question for Doc. Doc, do you think it's going to take for newer collectors like me who's coming to the industry, right? And not just celebrity, for anybody, from a regular, do you think it's going to take an education on them to be able to understand the exclusiveness of, like, when they say, oh, I can't, so as a collector, if I can't buy a piece of art, if I want to buy art and they say, well, you're not one of our collectors right now, I can't get that art. So I want to talk about that real quick. So the ecosystem that I feel that we need to bring in is somewhere where we could access, because access is one thing that we really don't have a lot to in our communities, which prohibits us from being able to succeed a lot of times, right? The access. So a lot of times we can't access the paintings that we want because they're in certain galleries, they're in certain places, and they're saying, well, you're not on our list of you're not on our list of collectors and stuff like that. So if there was an ecosystem where newer collectors or collectors of Black and African descent could kind of lean on and say, you know what, I don't have to go to the regular galleries. There's an ecosystem here for us that doesn't devalue the current works of the artist. I would love to join that, and I'll be all in for that. But I don't think it exists. Do you think that exists right now, that we can buy art from a different ecosystem and not devalue the work of the artist?
I think there are alternative pathways to acquiring work that you want. You know what I mean? Because again, to your point, there are a lot of galleries that are kind of set up to sell exclusively to certain kinds of collectors because they're all looking at the art. To Chantel's point, going beyond those sites like the auction houses and the art people, things like that, and contacting artists directly, get to know the artist, build a relationship with them, buy directly from the artist. That's always a viable option. And there are a number of African American or Black or African collecting groups that work together to do that. Not only do they buy work from that artist, but they will, create opportunities to exhibit that artist's work, so that the value can also rise with that artist's work because they're not all collectively collecting the
Same way.
Question: how does the value rise?
From the popularity and the sale of the work, the success of the work. So, for example, I had a collector named Paul Jones. During like 1960s, 70s, when he worked in D.C., he would go to Howard University and he would go to the studio of an MFA artist. He would buy as much work as he can. He was a lawyer. He would buy a lot of work, and then go back to his place and set up, these salon-style exhibitions and invite all his lawyer friends and professional friends. And, I just invest in artists. You should go support them. They go buy the work. Those people come together and they're like, this artist is someone that we should know. They go to a gallery and let's do a big show for this artist and do a retrospective. So that's the value.
Yeah, I think that's the same explanation of what exists now.
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
So understanding that process is what we're saying that as Black people that are not familiar with that have to understand to validate ourselves. So what we're saying is not getting validation from this corporation, right?
Yeah.
But we have to understand, get the knowledge of how they validate things so that we can validate ourselves, because there is no Black man auction house, right? Because we don't understand how it runs.
We don't need to have an auction house necessarily. We don't necessarily need to have one. I mean, what you're saying, but we don't necessarily need to have one.
You want to make sure that, so you say one thing, right? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Even, no. I mean, I'm just saying, these are the general terms. So when I think about it, I say, okay, well, if we want to create an ecosystem like Ferguson was just saying, I'm kind of riding with you because I understood what you're saying when it comes to, as a collector, so the artists, if you call it, I deal with the artists directly a lot. And some of the artists even said, I have a contract with them. I don't feel right selling to you without doing this. Some do that, but I'm not going to throw on that. But what I'm trying to say is the value of the art. And we're not talking about the value per se of the validation of the white people or the Black people, whatever. I was just more talking about if you're going to an art reel but that's already been existing, and you say, okay, well, they're doing it this way, but they've been doing it for so many years, and their values they keep going, so they know how to do it. Like, that's not broken. We're not in it, but that shit ain't broken because that shit is working nice. In my opinion, it's working. I don't know. In my opinion, they're making money. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff, and it's been going around for years and years and years and years. We haven't been included. So it's like, do we think that we could benefit from a system like that we are involved in, or do we think that we don't want to be involved in it at all and we want to create something that's another way to drive value up? Because there'll have to be another thing besides supply and demand that drives the value of a painting up. Because that's what pretty much the auction house is doing. You're trying to drive supply and demand.
I think we actually were coming to an end, and I apologize.
Yeah, it's great conversation, and this is the dialogue that's supposed to be happening. Because it's all great conversation. There's a saying in Ghana that one head does not sit at the throne alone. It needs multiple heads. So this conversation builds like knowledge. So what I'm saying.
Can we let him also talk after you've done your piece?
Yes. Because
you had your hand up and you were ready.
We go back and forth. That's what they do in the government house. Go back and forth and then bring together a solution. So it's great perspective from everything. And that's what art is. Everybody does not look at art the same way. So it's all about perspectives.
I hear you, and also this is very similar to any industry that we're actually talking about, right? Because when you talk about a systemic issue, that system is played across everything, right? So So it doesn't even matter if we're talking about philanthropy. There is a hierarchy there. Because who has money? It's the have and the have not. So you want to be in a system, even if you say that you're not part of the ecosystem, to get to a certain level, you assimilate with that system. You do. That's just what it is. I'm sorry. And at the end of the day, if you want to disrupt the system, you break the system, you create a new system, you develop a system. There's enough intelligent people here who know how to do all aspects of it. This is essentially what Malcolm X is talking about. Like, we're sitting here asking them to allow us to come in and play in space that they created, and they don't want us to. And instead, we can put our heads together, and we have enough collective intelligence that we could develop our own systems and our own networks that actually do the thing that we're trying to do. Who assesses the value? We determine the value. We're the arbitrators instead of allowing them to do it. And the longer that you wait to do it and wait for them to allow you into the space that they're not going to let you in because history has already told us they don't want us there, like, you know, you're wasting time. Do it now. Now it is the time to do that. And at the end of the day, that's what we should be talking about.
Yeah. And let's give him a round of applause. And I hear everything you're saying. And I mean, I've got some things in the works that will be launching.
Everything's in the works. I've been doing this all day.
All day. But no, because I think it's really important that we do own our own. And at the moment, we're still fitting into their own. We're still working in their galleries. We're still working with their curators. We're working with their auction houses and everything else. I don't think we have to have everything that they've got. Some of their systems, yes, learning the blueprint can help, but I don't think we have to replicate all of what they are. And then I also feel like we need to widen our scope in terms of what we believe art is, and what it means to view art and who can view art. You know, just the recent show we did, I curated in New York. Yes, it was with a white-owned gallery, but I made sure that the room was full of our people because the narrative was our narrative. I made sure that, you know, that it was the artist's words that I was using to write my essay. And then, you know, there was a music playlist that went with it. Our dinner was, you know, I brought a chef, an award-winning Ghanaian chef to come and cook a Ghanaian meal. It was like a party. It was a vibe. It wasn't what they wanted it to be. And they loved it, right? You know, it had a soul to it. It had our spirit behind it. And that was really, really important for me with doing that. I said, okay, I wasn't going into this job for the gallery. I was doing it so that the artist would be able to bring his narrative from Ghana and bring it into that space and not have it limited to something about race or any other kind of political issue that they want to kind of put on us. I wanted it to be his story told, you know, and then told to people that it would resonate with. And these are some of the ways we can do it whilst we're still in the system. We have to infiltrate the system, right? Until we build our own. And I think that's really, really important. But it takes boldness. And it took a lot of negotiation. I cannot even tell you the number of emails I sent and the number of no's I had, but I kept advocating.
It was worth it, right? You did a great job.
So, I mean, like, this is something that's really, really important for us just to keep thinking on. We're never going to come to a definitive answer right here, right now. And if we think about this idea of African-centered, the idea of Africa is a political region, then everything about it still fits within the colonial system because it didn't exist before. Okay, so we have to, as a people, create our own understanding and our own idea of what it is. But we have to remember there's many, many voices that come into that. And so there's the idea of valuing the diversity within our unity. And I think that is going to be like one of the key things that we have to really think about when we come to like putting this together. Like, you know, there is no one way. The idea of Blackness, the word Blackness kind of pushes us into that thing. You know, like Stuart Hall always said, the idea of referring to yourself as Black doesn't tell you anything about yourself. It only tells you who you are not. But what we have to value is that the idea of Blackness has brought us together into this one family. And those are the things we have to take from it. So it's always about reframing language, reframing ideas, reframing systems. And I feel like that's kind of where we need to start with our thinking. That's how we need to enter into the conversation, not looking at like, what are they doing? What are they doing well? And how do we become the same? But that's just my point of view. But I think we can cut it there. Yeah, thank you all for sitting and listening.
Thank you so much. The wonderful Chantel Thompson.
Wonderful Calvin and
Ferguson.
Ferguson.
Thank you.
And I'm always available.